I'm Dave Burke. I'm with RGP, Resource Global Professionals. We are a global consulting firm. I'm the Director of Recruiting of the Carolina practice. Sit here in Charlotte, sit here in North and South Carolina. We're sponsoring today. A large part of our business is project managers. So PMP is a sexy certification for us. We have a booth downstairs. Love to talk with you. Let me tell you who these people are. Joe Griffin, Dr. Joseph Griffin, professional project manager and educator. Go by doctor?
No.
Currently, he is assistant teaching professor and faculty director of the Master of Science in Project Management program at Northeastern University. Is that uptown?
We do have a campus uptown, yes, but the main campus is in Boston.
In Boston?
Yeah.
Where are you, uptown or Boston?
Uptown.
Lou, how do you pronounce your last name?
Gais.
Lou Gais. Lou brings 45 years of business management and ownership and 30 years in construction in Charlotte and North Carolina. In addition to his business administration degree and background, he has an added base of knowledge through specialized training and years of experience in project management, construction accounting, North building codes, and construction problem solving and troubleshooting. And last but not least, Tony Hayes. Tony is responsible for leadership and oversight of project activities, project support, and clients and team members, administration of contracts, and has safety compliance oversight for Goodwill Construction Services. He started his time at Goodwill as a volunteer in 2006 and joined the team in 2015. He has over 25 years of experience in the construction industry and brings his skills in people management, construction productivity, and training development to Goodwill. Your panel.
Okay, I guess I'm on. I figured somebody has a question. You want me to just pick on somebody to get things started? Or I tell you what, I'll
Okay.
You want to go first?
Yeah,
Take it
okay.
away.
So I'll give you our typical problems that we have here and just see where you have it. So we're a specialty contractor. And our deliverable begins, of course, early in the project and in the last hours of the project. We're typically dependent on old hardware, like functional, almost ready to final TCO space turned over. Often required, we're going to have to utilize the owner's network infrastructure, which often isn't online or in place at that time. We're forgotten about, and of course, as the construction schedule is collapsed, we lose a lot of our time to perform tasks on the back end of the project. We spend a lot of time trying to identify what are the risks, communicate that with general contractors, and those trades that we're dependent upon, but still we're the smaller worry. So how best do you feel as an outside company to approach them? Because often we aren't part of the general contractor's team. We may be part of the owner's team only, which even takes less precedence to the general contractor when they push. And if we're part of the general contractor's team, we'll just do what I say regardless of any sense of application into the project. We do a good job at it. We have to be somewhat agile at it, but it is very difficult. We can be very trying to make adjustments with multiple projects going on in the book, and adjusting for things that, at any given time we may have 15 or 20 projects running active that have 40 to 1,000 hours involved. So there's a lot of moving and management that occurs with it. So we're seeing a trend where the general contractors are getting lazy, and so all works in projects. I assume you see that the GCs are taking more and more of an administrative role on, and less of a construction role sometimes. You used to see more interaction with the GCs and some of the core trade. And it just becomes a contract, an administrative function. A lot of the guys are younger. It's interesting to see some of the senior fellows mentor members of their own team, the arguments that you hear and what comes to quality and budget. Budget and time is all anybody worries about, not the quality of products. You see those types of things evolving. We're also seeing where some of our trades are going to get pushed to one project manager, and then they'll want to sole source it to one group simply because of the efficiency. They think there's one person good to choke. The owner won't assume having fees for a manager on site for the entire project. It will just price the job out of place. And the GC won't pick up that part. It just becomes a subset of what they do and more of a bother to them than a true guidance thing. What do you guys think about all that?
That was a lot. Yeah, that was. Oh, you said you were a specialty contractor. What trade?
Security, actually.
Security.
So access control, give you the reference, so the card readers you saw, seeing the doors here, is part of what we do. So it's instrumentation, logic control, and we have access control panels or equipment that runs in the background in IT room or IT space. But the big thing that kills us is the GC won't put the doors up till the last day. They'll put them all up on the last night and expect us to do them the next morning. You're looking at 4 to 6 hours worth of work. And in most cases, the doors, find a door today that's plumb and square that functions correctly to begin with, let alone what we have to perform on. And it's their tasking that falls apart at that point. It's because again, we're at finish time with a lot of what we do. Trying to manage into that. And people laugh about it because you'll say, what do you think about security in the pay-door contract? But I mean, we manage projects that are excess of $1 million runs. I mean, it's a substantial investment.
In my experience, a lot of times you are controlled by the owner. You don't actually work with the GC, or it's thrown on. And a lot of it is really the communication between the owner and the GC. And a lot of times the owner doesn't even mention it until you're down into the task along the way. Or at the beginning, he says he's going to handle it. When then he says at the end, when the time comes, he's not going to handle it. He gives it to you. And so you're down at the end. Everybody is probably behind at this point because that's usually what happens. There's a deadline. Everybody wants to get to the deadline. And from a contractor, you don't want to hang your doors to the last minute because you're going to get beat up. They're going to get damaged. So you keep it to the last thing. And it's going to come down to the key is scheduling, and the project manager. We look at our business, the way we're trying to do it now is what we call a job superintendent, and then there's a project manager over him, and the superintendent is on the job, and he's to communicate the schedule or let us know the problems. We handle the project manager handles the schedule and works it through him, and we're trying to put we have a new program we're trying to use to give all our superintendents tablets that you as a sub can get in on, can use this communicate with us, either to the project manager or the superintendent. Can also communicate with the owner. But to me, from what you said, it's a matter of scheduling, and you should up front, if you can, be contacted and know how long is it going to take to do your job. We need to know that so we can schedule it in. If we're going to hang the doors today, then do you need tomorrow? Do you need the next day, or do you need the day after that? How long are you going to need that? And how's that going to fit with inspections? Because the bottom line is we need a CO, at the very least a TCO, so that they can get open and operating. In the commercial end, that's what drives it. They have money invested, and they want to get open and start turning money. So, I mean, you hear this all the time in any business. It's communication. You got to get back and forth, and it's the GC's responsibility to make time for you, but it's also your responsibility to get the GC's attention, to make a spot with them. That's my opinion.
I think another thing to add to that is, schedule's everything, and you should always be in a posture where you have a look-ahead schedule. You should have a 2 to 4 week reflection every single week of what's coming down the pipeline. So if you feel that you're absent in that 2 week look-ahead, then that's when you as a trade communicating to the GC would have to raise a flag and say, look, where are we in this program in this next 2 weeks? I have expectations. That's when you bring it to the line. And also, from a manufacturing standpoint, put an old manufacturing hat on, is there a place you can pre-assemble? If the doors are stored somewhere, already painted, ready to go, all they need to be is hung. If you got to drill in, diodes or anything like that for security, can you do that while they're in the staging area? So there's a lot of, when you look at all the flaws that we talk about as a GC, I'm there. I mean, I'm a GC, so, but it's a partnership. And I think that the key to our success is we always have that look ahead. And we partner the schedule from the beginning with all the trades to begin with. So if you have a scope of work that's critical to the finishing to get that CO, then we should be discussing that up front, putting it in the schedule, and then making sure we're managing the look ahead. So.
So what I was going to say is, you want the bad news or the bad news? I mean, that's the reality. It is incredibly difficult for when you have a trade subcontractor that's got their act together and you're working with a GC or an owner that doesn't have their act together on the project management side. It's incredibly frustrating. There's pretty much nothing you can do about it to a great extent other than proactively try to communicate out, try to get ahead of the schedule. And really it's the squeaky wheel that's gets the grease is the unfortunate thing. It's incredibly difficult when you're working as a sub with the GC and you're not their priority. And as you said, sometimes you're under the owner's contract, not the GC's. That's life. I mean, unfortunately, that's the reality of the world that we live in. And my experience in project management, not as many years as these guys has been, but I find that compared to other industries, in terms of the project management aspects, that a lot of especially smaller companies are way behind on the project management piece in terms of building a schedule, keeping that schedule up to date, looking at risk mitigation, looking at quality standards in any way other than just the building code. And so you sort of take what I would call, there are plenty of exceptions to this, so please no one get offended by what I'm about to say. But on the project management side, many construction contractors are what we would consider very immature in their project management practices. And then you have a sub that's proactive, trying to be mature in that. And those two bump up against each other. And that's just life. So that's the bad news and the bad news from my perspective. You do everything you can, communicate out, try to get on the schedule, try to get the priority, let them know, but the reality is some project managers are just bad at their job.
And then throw a owner's property manager in the mix.
Yeah.
It's a project manager that's managing a separate set of.
Right,
It's
yeah.
very interesting. We do it, sometimes I think we do it very well.
But
I just think it's something that everybody should become more and more aware of.
listen, every time I worked with a sub who actually cared about the schedule, that was great news. I mean, I wanted a sub worried about my schedule. It's a two-way street.
Can you talk a little bit more about the tablets that you're using? Who do you give them to? How resistant are they to it? How do you buy that?
Well, this is a new phase for us. This is something we're just starting, and I'm still learning the program. We all are. In fact, we're in the trial basis of it.
But you see the benefit.
Well, we're growing. We have a lot more jobs. The problems, I've been in this business a long time, started in customizing. The problems I had 30 years ago, the same problems in construction today. They haven't changed. They're pretty much the same. So the communication is the only way you can solve them. So we're hoping by getting our superintendents the tablets, and they can, according to the software, the client can communicate through it. He can't do everything, but he can see the schedule also. Everybody can see the schedule. Anybody can communicate online through this just by getting online, and that's a pretty easy thing to do today. Everybody has cell phones, and we're giving out these tablets, and it's going to take some training, but we're very optimistic. We think it's just something that has to happen at this point.
We use them quite often too, and every field personnel has tablets in our organization, and we have a CoreCon system, which is a construction management system that goes all the way from the estimate all the way through to the end of the project and keeps all the historical data. And the benefit for us is that every single person in the company can see every single thing about a project. If we're in the field and we have to make decisions, we can see budget things that are there, and it gives a great initiative for the project management team to always be communication, together. We can see the schedules, like you're saying, and it gives a lot more field buy-in and responsibility. You can even keep time cards on if you really wanted to. We take photographs of receipts, send it straight to finance instantly. So
where are you hosting your schedule? Is it on your platform or do you have a third-party platform for, are you using like Primavera or?
Go ahead, we're just trying this, it's called UDA, and they're out of,
It's a third-party then, so that
right.
everyone can get in, so you don't have to worry about security into your system?
well, I don't know that you ever worry about security, I mean, I don't know that.
Yeah, I work in nuclear, yes, we do.
Okay. We're not so worried about that so much, but I would hope it'd be secure. I really can't answer
But it
that.
is a third-party platform, so that
Yes.
everybody can see.
Right.
Ours is too.
I have a question. How many people are in construction right now or have something related to construction?
Oh, cool.
Okay. How many people that are in here, obviously, have some interest in it, but want to potentially explore that or just know more about that? So pretty much the balance of everyone else. So I think what would be important is if we talk a little bit about how does someone who does project management gain experience, education, in a variety of ways. Joe, I know you can speak both on the educational side, and Tony and Lou definitely on the hands-on, how you would recommend someone who has that interest as a project manager of how they engage in the construction field.
You want me to take the education side first? Sure. I landed in construction by default. I grew up in the business. My father ran a company, so I inherited the family business, so that was an easy one for me. But now I'm at a university full-time teaching project management, but I also oversee a graduate certificate program in construction management. They'll speak to this. I think it's incredibly difficult to go from X to Y in any industry for the most part. There are so many little things that there are a lot of lessons, my dad would say, that can't be taught, they have to be learned, and I think construction is very much that way. You can read about it in the book, but when you get on the field, this kind of stuff happens back here, and that's the world. So what I do is, for our students who may be studying project management, we'll get them a concentration in construction management. So they kind of have a bridge on paper. They begin learning the language, they begin learning the terminology, they begin learning the industry, the field, different approaches to building, different approaches to scheduling, materials handling, procurement. They sort of learn all this stuff. But if they've been, say, at a mature level position at one company doing project management, say in IT, they shouldn't have an expectation to move in a parallel field level job into construction. They're going to need to go in and work as an assistant site superintendent, an assistant project manager, maybe even an assistant scheduler in some way. And then the hope is because of all their years of experience and maybe some add-on education, it reduces the learning curve on the job more quickly for them. So they're able to excel in the field. So, that's sort of the way that we counsel. Expect to start back towards the bottom and work your way up. Don't expect to move into a more senior level project management position, even though you may have been in a senior level project management position in another industry. So aim for being an assistant PM or something of that manner, and hopefully you'll advance up pretty quickly once you begin learning the in and outs of the industry.
There's a few other avenues too. How many people in here are PMPs? All right, so you guys know what a PMBOK is, right? All right, there's an organization, NCCER, National Center for Construction, Education and Research, NCCER. The website, I believe, is nccer.com. They have focused two project management books, Project Management and Project Supervision, which follow the PMBOK. And the only difference is everything that is in the project management system is related to construction. So you can take the same exact logistics that you know now in project management, read through and study those guides, and it can give you a heads up. They have a certificate program as well. National Center for Construction Education Research is down in Alachua, Florida, but they're nationwide. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking to even be interested in it, you can join those courses online. So, and the ABC, Associated Building Contractors, and the AGC, Associated General Contractors, both have those courses available here locally. So, but again, you're not going to jump from that level to that level well, you know, it's not gonna be a lateral, you know, there's gonna be some, you know, scopes of work to learn and some things to learn on your own, so you will probably be at a different level, but that's, when someone comes to me with a project management background and they've taken the NCCR courses, I know that they're oriented to the construction trade, and that's key. So,
And I would just like to add one thing. In the back of the event guide, under Tony's bio, those credentials are listed. So if you want to look them up and you don't remember what those letters stand for, they're in there. Luke?
Can I add something to that regarding like the NCCR certification in project management? That's a great opportunity to have that certification, but you have to understand most of your foremen, your general foremen, anyone in that management, they're not performing just project management tasks. They may very well be performing in the discipline that they are over as well. So you want to consider that before you just decide to go for the NCCR project management, that if you don't have a civil background or a metal background, you might have some challenges with using that.
absolutely, that's what the courses are there, they'll guide you.
You know, I add to that too, from working with project managers, younger coming out, it's practical application a lot of times, it's very, very important. It actually makes a good project manager, even though the first thing in the book tells you, you don't have to be an expert in what you're managing. But as a startup, if you're looking, I think, to get into construction, look for a smaller craft who needs scheduling help, administrative help, ordering help, and at least learn the outskirts of something. She mentioned earlier, you're talking more of an engineering base, but there's plenty of things all the way from finishes, interior design, all of those apply, as well as just basic electrical craft. Whole knowledge in.
And it really depends upon which area of construction you want to go into. If you're going into commercial, heavy commercial, or you're going to go into industrial, or you're going to go in and build hospitals, that requires an entirely different background than you're going into residential construction, in my view.
Absolutely.
The threshold's much lower in certain levels of residential construction than it is in others, or can be, I should say.
Okay. And Lou, I was curious to hear your thoughts on the proper way for someone to come into the trade. Let's say if I approached you and I said, Lou, I don't want to do IT anymore. I want to build, want to be down in the dirt. I want to do project management, and I want to work with you. What would you be looking for as a way of giving me advice before you would consider me? What are the things that you would want to have, and what could you tell me to go get before I'd be ready to do that?
Well, I've had the best luck with people that started in the business and kind of worked up through it. That started as a carpenter or laborer and kind of learned the business, and that's the way I learned it, so maybe that's why I'm partial to it. If I had someone that came to me from a different trade, which has been happening lately, I would say if I were to hire them, I'd probably just hire them as a laborer or something to learn the job, or how it, you have to know the steps involved. You have to know what other people do. And you have to learn the respect of the other trades so that you know what they do and how important their job is. Even if it's a small job, it's very important in the process, and they have to learn that everybody has a spot. So, I didn't answer your question, I guess. I'm really not sure what I'd do. I'd just say you have to learn construction. And we're not a big company, so we don't like have a training program. You know, that's something we just don't have.
Yeah. So right now, the project management responsibility falls on yourself to do most of that work, or do you have someone who actually does it, the supervisors, or where would you place that?
Well, my company right now is myself and my two sons. My sons are the primary project managers. I do some of that, but they do that, and then we work through we have about 6 superintendents that we use. And they are on the job, and the project managers go to the job, but they're not on the job every day. Superintendents are on the job every day.
Okay.
And the communication with us through them is very important.
Okay. I think one of the things that I'd be curious about is project risk. So anyone have any thoughts on kind of things they'd like to know related to project risk? All right, I'll ask that one. You want?
I'm with you, Tony, on integrating aspects of environmental safety and project management. And I've done international and domestic, and now I'm sliding over into government. And what you're seeing is just a hodgepodge of get her done versus the strict discipline, if you'd like to use those words, strict discipline of project management. It's almost two completely different worlds trying to smash together. And when, as a safety professional, you're talking about risk and environmental and sustainability, and you have a general contractor or a superintendent looking at you with this look in your face like, what planet are you from? There's sometimes a difficult dynamic there. And the charter and what? We just got a contract and we need to get this building or whatever in the ground looking good in X number of days. And you're going, well, let's have to change back here. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And you start to see some movement toward that, but it's a little bit of a difficult struggle.
It's a highly competitive market, period. I mean, there's a few contractors bidding, a lot of contractors bidding for the same job. And, the bid tabs come in and you're dollars away, but you win the bid. So that's the first thing. You've already learned the scope. You've already bid on it, so therefore you know all the elements that's going to be involved in the project. So having that understanding of the scope, then you got to go forward and you got to think about what you're talking about. Right up front when you make that estimate, you got to think about those risks. You got to say, what's the cost of safety on this job? How many PFASs do I have to have, to finish up the roofing or, whatever the fall protection may be, it has to be calculated there. So all those little bits and pieces up front, right there from that get-go, here's where I've got to go. So somewhere in there, you've got a ball of risk. And you have to carry that all the way through until you hit the touchdown. And it falls apart when things like you're talking about, the schedules doesn't come together, trades aren't working together. So your biggest thing is to be ready when a trade's there, try to crash the schedule as best you can, because your biggest expense, your biggest risk is general conditions. When you exceed that schedule, you're getting penalties right up front. If you have any safety factors involved in there, you're going to get penalties and maybe even shutdowns. So I think the best thing is, twofold. In your estimate, analyze all your risk. Make sure you have some types of application or scenario to move forward with that. And then make sure you're having a great pre-construction meeting with all the trades. Your expectations from the trades are given, and you help share that risk. We're going forward, and here's where we're going. Is everybody on the train? What's your problems? Okay, we'll set the doors aside and you can fix them later, or during the schedule. There's a lot of things that from that upfront planning and that pre-construction you can iron out, and then hopefully it's smooth sailing from there. Now, is that real life? I mean, from a project management standpoint, that's the objective.
I do want to follow up on that, but I'm afraid I'm going to take the answer in a different way. Because you talked about we don't see the project charter, we don't see the project management documentation. And you would think me teaching at a university this stuff, I would want it by the book. But I'm a slave to practicality and what works myself. We only want enough project management processes to be helpful to accomplish the project. And every other bit of red tape we can chuck out the window, we want to check out the window. So we want people to charter projects in our language, have the kickoff meeting, pre-construction meeting that gets us on the right path. We want to have risk management, we want to have quality management, we want to have a communications plan, we want to have stakeholder engagement, we need a procurement plan, we need all these things. But oftentimes, at least my experience in construction, we rarely call it that stuff, but we end up doing all that stuff in some form or fashion. And I think that's probably fine. I've not seen the resource that you mentioned that sort of maps the project management process to the construction trade. I'm going to go look that up myself and sort of see what it is, because we never managed by the PMBOK when I did construction projects. We did all those pieces in some form and fashion, and in some areas we were more, I would say, if we use this term, mature according to PMBOK processes in certain areas of our businesses, but in other areas of our business we would have been considered very immature compared to the PMBOK. But it really worked well for us. So I think that you have to approach any industry that way, is looking at, we want enough process to be helpful, but we don't want any more than that. Because a lot of times we don't want the process to get in the way of the work that we're doing. Does that make sense? At least that's my take.
I think a lot of people.
Add to that, it's like I've been in project management for 30 years, and I've been a certified project manager for 2 months. I've addressed all of the issues.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the hell they were.
But you did
I
it.
do now.
Yeah, that's right.
And it is a matter of being practical. You address it, each and every one of those knowledge areas.
Yeah.
You don't call them saying, you need a good project manager, I guess you need to get with enough on it.
And I mean, I'm all for the training that helps people do risk better, do quality better. But at the same time, I don't think it has to be so formal that it straps us down to a process and not the work that we're doing. That's kind of what I'm after.
Healthcare quality is kind of a bigger issue.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's refreshing to hear that from the academic side of this panel, that rather than what I would think is the application side of it. You don't need an 1.5-inch spec book for every job.
That's exactly right.
What I've noticed a little bit, because I'm much in the same boat, long time project management, but shorter time credential. PMBOK actually affords a basic for communications to get somebody on the right piece. Because if I tell somebody those doors are risky, they identify what the risk is and take it. And that's just the end of it. It gives a common language, a structure,
Right.
without being the structure, I guess.
Yeah.
I'd like to have Tony talk a little bit about, Tony, you do a lot of projects. They're all over. If you could give us an idea of kind of the organization from your perspective, how that team builds out and where you think the greatest risk is, where you're most concerned, where you focus the most on making sure risk doesn't happen at a particular level.
Wow, that's a lot. Our organization, we're kind of unique. I left the industry and went to the education side and then came back to the industry on a calling. Goodwill Industries of the Southern Piedmont had a training program which I volunteered while I was in the industry the first time. And they started training people that wanted to be employed in the construction field. Now the backgrounds are all over from, out of jail for 5 years, rehab, whatever, but that's what Goodwill's mission is to bring people back. And so my director was asked about 2.5 years ago, how do we sustain this construction trade employment? He said, well, let's build a construction company. And so Goodwill Construction Services was born. And then I was asked to come and be the operations project manager. And what we do mainly is work with the Charlotte Housing Authority, the City of Charlotte, and we bid freely and openly to other projects. We're an unlimited general contractor. But when we go into CHA contracts and City of Charlotte contracts, there's enormous risk. You got that, charter well defined, and that end date is established that you can't even think about changing. And the budget better be right because you're not going to get another dime. So it's heavy financial risk. And then our clients, and our clients, I'm not talking about the owners, for us, it's the people we bring through the training program and the people we employ. That's our clients. And it comes with a high risk, especially with the backgrounds. But the thing that we risk the most is we don't have the skilled trades. We have to develop those guys from the education classroom, bring them over to the construction company, and then continue their education for another 90 days. So I guess the financial part, because we know we'll not get another dime. Safety is always a factor because we're going into houses and buildings that need structural integrity rebuilt. So there's a danger there just from the structure alone. And then I guess the biggest factor is, can we meet those schedules with the labor pool that is in our mission, you know. So we're kind of unique in that aspect, but there's a lot of risk involved in the aspect of finance, safety, and, you know, just can we get the job with the performed skilled labor that we have. So a little unique.
I think one of the areas that we all run into is finding skilled laborers to work. I mean, we have a business, we've been fortunate, we've had some of the same employees from the day we opened. But going forward and looking for people that are gonna have the same passion, I think someone in construction, if you have a passion for it, you're gonna really put forth the effort that it takes. So we do battle looking for, you know, employees that we, you know, will have for a long time.
Construction trade is a really unique industry. You know, we're not instant button pushing world, you know, and nobody really wants to get out there and perform with their hands. And you know, we're all being project managers. You know, we either came from the field or, you know, we've had some experience there. But the generation today coming through the ranks that we're out there needing to get involved, it's just no interest. I mean, and the money. I mean, how are you going to convince a kid coming out of college or high school to go and become a mason and make $10 an hour and work your tail off in the worst, you know, weathers and things like that, you know, lugging brick all day? I mean, it's just, how do you do that when I can figure something else out, you know? So it's a challenge, it really is. But NCCR is trying to figure out that challenge. All the colleges, community colleges are trying to figure it out. Luckily, at Central Piedmont, I'm a part-time instructor at Central Piedmont as well. The enrollment's been good in the trades for HVAC and electrical and construction. As far as craftsmen and carpentry, a little so-so, but you know, you might get 3 that have that passion out of 50, and that's the sad thing about where we are in the labor base today.
Right, we've got 3, but more. Like what he said upstairs, I think, you know, gratitude and I think our employees have been there because we do, you know, come in and thank them and appreciate what they do. But like you said about the new generation, it's a push button generation, and so, you know, it's not teaching them the trades. It's going to be hard because the generations are coming up are a lot different.
Anybody here employ anyone else? Anybody else in here have employees? You know, the number one thing that we have as a problem when we are in the training aspect of it at Goodwill is employability skills. You know, people that really, they talk in text language, they write in text language, you know, go to an interview with a do-rag on. I mean, it's kind of, you know, basic, common, ethical skills that we all know in this room and we respect, but it's just employability skills are really, really hard to find today. I mean, it's another lacking thing.
I think that kind of brings up an interesting point. You know, we talk about a provider and a customer. So if you're building for a company, so in your case, you're building for, let's say, the city of Charlotte, an organization. Lou, you may be building for an end customer of a small shopping center, for example. In that case, you have subcontractors that do work, and they can be viewed as a supplier or customer. But in the end, there's that, I see this in IT as well. I have the business, IT is the provider. So what you don't have is this. You don't have this nice mesh. You've got, I'll call it opposing sides, but where you have the greatest success is when you have partnerships, where you actually look at a subcontractor, your customer, your supplier, as part of your business. It becomes the whole. You're a piece of this entire construction of a building that's serving someone, whether that's a financial benefactor or a person who moves in and lives in that house. How do you each view that at the subcontractor customer level? How do you view that relationship, and how do you address some of the challenges? Because what I think happens a lot is I'm the customer, I'm always right, but I'm also asking for the ridiculous things, and you're reasonable people, and you are trying to be profitable and fair at the same time. So if you could talk a bit about that, some of the challenges and how you kind of position yourself in partnering versus a supplier customer.
It's, first off, every job is different in construction. It's all different. And I relate it to something we're doing right now. You have an owner and you have an architect, and they have a budget. And you get the job, and the architect's over here, he's thinking you can do this for X amount of dollars. And where he's coming from, I have no idea, because he's not even close. And something like that. So the owner wants to know what's the problem. You're saying, you know, when you're working with them, and this is the point where you've been selected as a builder, parameters have been established, a customer we've done work for before, and trying to get him to say that, you know, you can't do what he's trying to do for that amount of money. And it's a delicate balance. And another problem you have is the architect is taking up all the time. You know, the project should have been started 3 months ago. You haven't started yet, but at the end, they haven't changed the date at the end yet. You know, they still want to hold that schedule. And you're already behind before you start. So you're trying to work this out. So, and this just happened, our architect says, well, go ahead and order the steel. We don't even have a signed contract yet. All right? And you're talking about maybe $30,000 worth of steel. And you say, okay, give me a directive to order it, and I'll order it. He won't give you a directive. So what do? You have to go to the owner and say, he's not going to give me the directive to order this. I'm not going to order it unless you give it to me. Because you talk about risk. If I don't have a signed contract and I'm ordering material, I'm liable to the provider. And it works all the way down through the job. You're going back and forth, and you're trying to keep a balance, and you're trying to talk to the architect. And then it comes down to value engineering. When the architect wants to do this, I can accomplish the same thing pretty much, but we're going to go about it a different way. It's going to be a little different. And you try to work all this together, and it's just back and forth. And it's back and forth and back and forth, and then you set the schedule, and you try to hold to it. And everybody out there is trying to break it because you have subs. And they're not only working for you, they're working for all these other people. And he has time over here, time over there. Well, this job was supposed to be ready here, is now over here. This job is going to be now supposed to be done here, is now ready here. He's got so many jobs he can only do one at a time, depending on how many people he has. So you have that to balance in. So you have to respect everybody's time, and everybody has to understand that. And you have to work it so that you don't have some little job holding up, you know, you've heard the term, a dime holding up a dollar. You have that constraint. So it's just it's a back and forth. And I mean, you burn up the phone lines. It's just, you're always on the phone, you're always talking to people. And it's a continuation of that. And the schedule's always being, it's not being expanded because nobody wants to end it at the end, but you're always tweaking it inside those parameters, trying to do the best you can. And that's even before you come to change orders.
It's a bad word. I think to add to what Lou's saying and to help a little bit with the subcontractor base partnering, I think if you go back to your question about the schedule and how you do the scheduling, one thing that we find, and it brings a real great asset to our company, is we do partner quite well with our trades and our suppliers. We pay our bills net 15. Within 15 days, the contractor gets paid. When trade shows up on the job site, we're ready for them. That's a big pet peeve of mine running project management. When a trade shows up, they're mobilized. And that means they took their time and effort to get to your job site, and they want to make a good, decent pay at a good, decent time within a schedule. So you're very rude and inept as a project manager if you're not there for them to be prepared when they show up. And so if you're always ready for the trade, you pay your bills on time, very accurately, you don't have any dickering with them as far as that, then they'll take that time in 5 jobs, 10 jobs, to make sure they prioritize you as their customer. If you're wishy-washy all over the board, they show up, the doors aren't ready, you know, or whatever the case may be, you know, you're gonna be tired of working with that general contractor. It's just gonna be a pain. You're like, I gotta go over there to Tony's job again, you know? And so you have to establish that up front. I mean, that's gotta be your management practice. Be ready for every trade when they show up. Pay them on time, you know, and partner with them in the long term. Now, on the flip side of that, make sure you benchmark them. They're not, you know, overcharging you for their services as well. Because you could do 15 jobs with one trade and realize that you're paying $20 too much in the industry. So, but that's kind of the way we try to partner.
Okay, Joe?
Yeah, we were very intentional in this whenever I was working in the industry. We're fortunate to have a lot of long-term subs. So like the plumber, subcontractor's been working for the company for 30 years. Same subcontractor, same company. The HVAC, 25 years, the electrician, about 21, 22 years. So these are long-term relationships with those core trades that we worked with. But what we would do is we would have meetings where we would bring the trades together at least once a year, at least sort of the main people from the different subcontractors. And we would ask questions. What frustrates you when you get to the job site that was done by the carpenters, or that was done by the sheetrock people, or was done by the insulation people? And we tried to figure out what little things we could do, because we were sort of a strip builder, in that we would build the same style houses in 30 different neighborhoods in about 7 different counties. We'd have anywhere, I mean, we're a big builder. We'd have about 45, 50 jobs going, single family homes going at a time. So whether I built the house here with minor modifications or over here with, you know, 30% different, the core of the house was basically the same. So having that kind of relationship exist between the subs, they were in that way accountable to each other in a lot of ways. They knew that, you know, Joe screwed up on the HVAC rough end, and now we're going to have to deal with that down the road with this piece. They knew Joe. They'd call Joe and complain at Joe, not complain at me. So that was kind of nice. So it was that kind of thing, I think, was a big help for us. Another thing that we did with subcontractors is and I think what you bring up about being good for the subcontractors will make them good for you, is we would have sort of incentives worked in to them working for us. Whereas if they would dedicate 80% of their time to us and not go off and help other people, because they didn't rely totally on us for their livelihood, they had to have other customers, we get that. But when I could about have the electrician at my job site every week, a different job site for me, with, you know, 40 or 50 houses going. So if they would give me 4 days on, 4 out of every 5 days maybe for a given job or a portfolio of jobs, then I would incentivize them by paying them a little bit more, giving them priority on different things, in some way try to incentivize them giving me more time and not getting caught away with other jobs. And then the other piece, which somebody mentioned gratitude up there, it made me think about it. We did a yearly Christmas party, and if you stepped on our job sites, you came to the Christmas party. And we played, corny, but we played bingo at the Christmas party. And I bet we gave away $5,000 to $6,000 a year, you know, at $20 a game bingos, which sounds like kind of silly, but you've never seen people get excited over $20 when they get to call bingo. There's something about that. But, you know, it was their families, their kids, you know, and I'm not with the company anymore, but I still go and play bingo every year. But, you know, something like that I think was very meaningful in a small way.
I think team building, where you don't really think about it in construction, but I think that's a big part.
Yeah.
Bring people together outside of just the.
Yeah.
And it's hard because of the hours you put in.
Mm-hmm.
And also going back on, you know, the architect's in there drawing a set of plans, and that looks wonderful. But when you get out to the job, you know, it can be completely different. I think that's a big area.
Sooner or later, everybody will have BIM. It won't be a problem.
Right now, that you know, it would really be nice sometimes if they were actually on the job site, just to kind of see what wasn't exactly what was drawn.
Yeah.
Well, I'm with the agency, so just disclaimer. I'm sort of asking a couple of questions just to get a feel for where we are right now in construction on that early collaboration is sort of everybody's hinting at, is that if you can get in more together earlier, I know most of the time that happens with negotiated work, rather than public work, but, do you feel like there's more of an awareness of the benefit of early collaboration so that some of the scheduling gets worked out, some of the difference between the designer and the GC and subs, and where do you think people are on that, and they think about it? The benefits of it?
I think, go ahead. I think that for us, it's just everyday life as a company. I think it's unique to a company structure. There's a lot of companies, you can look at Rogers Builders and some of the other ones, they have pre-construction departments, and that's all they do. They collaborate with the estimators, and then it goes into pre-con, and then they pass it over. But that collaboration between the estimator and the pre-construction or the project managers, it's a must-have. To look at all those roadblocks and all those humps in the road, you got to have them ironed out before you go into the project, hopefully. But I don't really see, the absence of architectural problems, with the architectural plans. What happens is, you're right, they'll put it down beautifully on paper and think that you can accomplish that within a penny budget, You're always going to have value engineering during the project, because somebody's going to be over their cost code. There's always going to be clashes, as we'd say it in BIM, where, that steel beam's in the way of me putting my HVAC pipe, but we don't know it unless we use BIM until it's there, So I think that it's unique to the company. I think more companies see the value add in pre-construction and managing that. That answers your question, I think, And my personal opinion, what I see, but it's a must for us. We even go to the point of taking photographs of every joist we're going to change out or anything of that nature. We go kind of crazy on it because we're a small company, and the estimator and I are the ones that make the decisions on what we bid on. So it's
First, from a industry-wide perspective, where do you think people are, with adopting that now, or just being aware of it? And then from a project management perspective, personally, how do those two departments get? How do they work together? Sort of the BIM modelers and the project manager.
Go ahead.
Well, I used to be a program developer at CPCC and did construction management, so BIM was one of our big things. We can't get to the BIM education arena fast enough. Where it's at right now, BIM is affordable to the big companies. And the lack of BIM in smaller companies is going to be one of those technologies, either you get on board or you're going to kind of get weeded out, because part of the selling program for these big companies is to be able to take right up front in the pre-construction during the estimate and show a 3D model of what we're going to do and how we're going to build it. If you don't have that resource in your marketing program, then you're at a deficit right away. But if you do have it, if I'm an owner, I'm sitting here looking at a 3D of what my building's going to look like, and you're already giving me some ideas, that's more value add than this other guy over here, even though it might be $10,000 cheaper. Do owners buy into BIM? More and more, but it's on the heavy commercial side. So we're not, all of BIM is basically on the heavy commercial side. We're at benefits to most is in the hospital arenas with gas piping and all the multiple oxygen pipings and all that. So that arena is definitely always going to have it. It's going to be a prereq pretty soon for all hospital areas.
Could you describe what BIM actually is so that they understand?
Building integrated modeling. Anybody heard of it? What BIM does is basically transfer the plans and puts it into a 3D model. And so, like, if we're running HVAC pipe and we find that, oh wow, that steel beam doesn't work, the HVAC pipe can't go through that steel beam, then that's called a clash. So by modeling it and just putting it into graphics, basically, and it's all programs that do this, Rivet and Tekla, there's a couple of other programs out there. But by being able to do that, it's more cost effective in the long run. But now they've got it's 5D where they can put the schedule in there, they can put the estimate in there. So as you're building the first floor, it'll tell you where you're at on the cost and where you are on the schedule. And so I mean, it's an overwhelming change to the industry. It's owned by the architectural world right now, but it's getting more and more into the trade world. So is that?
So it's a lot more places for you to be wrong, just so.
It's true.
Here's a good example of why that technology is good. You know, if you were building a 2-story house and you're setting the floor joists in place and the toilet is 3 feet off the wall, and you set that there and you find out the guy's cutting the hole, and what does he do? He's right where that floor truss is. So now we have to box it in, we gotta do a lot of work. That technology lets you see that in advance, and the first thing you do is you say, okay, I gotta move it over 4 inches. Not a big deal, there's still enough room between the toilet and the tub, and that's how I avoid that field, I'll call it field change, or change request. And it costs you hundreds of dollars for an engineer, potentially to sign a new piece of engineering, and the person to do that work. And not to mention the guy who cuts through it isn't proud of the fact that he didn't go down to the bottom and measure, but he wasn't expecting that either.
Can I go back to your pre-construction piece? Because I just had an experience with a company down in Atlanta, a large company that does renovations. So they'll go in and buy older apartment complexes, 300, 400, 500, 600 unit complexes, and renovate them, and then sort of turn it over to their asset division to manage them. But one of the things that shocked me is they sort of had this I was doing just construction management training 2 days for some of their new employees, but they had sort of this 10-step sort of high-level process that they followed for their construction management piece of it. And I was shocked that 7 of the 10 steps was pre-construction, and then it was basically construction and closing after that. And when I asked them about that, they said, we're pretty good at building things. We just weren't really good at planning what we were building. And so they had made a conscious choice to go back and place a lot of emphasis on those. So maybe in the next few years it'll all be balanced out. But I just thought it was kind of interesting. I hadn't seen anyone see the need for that and actually change documentation to support that.
Question back here?
So, 2 questions, really to follow up on our discussion. First of all, my opinion, if it's a good architect, they are coming out to the site and making sure that their drawings actually can be implemented. How often do you typically see that actually occurring? Would you say that that's pretty common, not common, or a pipe dream? Or my second question is, for those smaller firms that aren't perhaps using Revit, what would be the typical type of software application that they would be using from your experience?
Software for what purpose?
Daily.
Like-
Well, if it's not 3D modeling and
I'm
it's
with you.
AutoCAD, but
Yeah.
you were talking about small firms that typically it's the larger firms that are using Revit or similar types of BIM tools.
But we
Well-
didn't, we built from a set of plans, just, I mean, that's the way that we did it. We didn't have to, we were a spec builder though. I did some custom, but honestly tried to stay away from that as much as possible. Those clients need a lot more than I wanted to give. So,
I just was curious to see what, based on your experience, you've come across that the smaller firms are typically using if they're not using Revit.
yeah, we just use CAD was my experience.
CAD or some similar
Derivation.
software.
We're small, so, the stuff, I haven't seen any of what Tony's talking about. It's not been available. As far as seeing architects on a job, as Tony could, said, if it's an architecturally controlled job or the financing is involved, you usually see an architect or one of his reps. When you make a pay app, they come out to look to see that you're where you say you are at. I don't generally see them on a job a lot for what we do once we start the job. Maybe towards the end, you see them, they want to see the end product. But I just don't, generally, unless it's a government job, which we don't do a lot of, I don't see them a lot, in my experience.
Out there.
Huh?
They really do, because we design build so many plans, just about every job we go to, that we've got to change at least 10 items on the plan, and they don't even come out to the site. I'm really frustrated about that on the civil side.
They start showing
And I'm
up.
not getting paid for it.
they start showing up, you may be thankful they didn't show up before.
Well, I've worked with
They get
Brian.
to-
Brian and I've worked together in a job we did, the engineer. I mean, he was off the money from the get-go. Now, he would come out, but it delayed the job and and he had to work things out. And he had to go back to the drawing board and he had other things to do. So you wait 2-3 days. In Brian's case, he's civil. If the rain comes like it did this weekend and that, he was ready to do it, it was dry. He's waiting for an engineer to change something. Now it rained. He can't start tomorrow. He has, something. So it's a problem.
I have another question. When it comes to, Joe, you talked about the relationship with some of the trades for 25 years. When you're bidding, in most cases, it's highly competitive, as Tony mentioned. You've got to make sure that every facet of that job is as economical as it can possibly be. You also know that when you open up, let's say, something, let's pick sheetrock, for example, you can get 10 quotes for that, but the one you use for 20 years provides you the best service, may be the cheapest at that moment, maybe not, may be the most expensive, but you don't have any problems, it gets done right, you don't have to worry about that. How do you weigh the risk of picking always the low cost versus the one you've got a track record with? How do you kind of justify maybe paying a little bit more because overall you get the product that you need, eliminate the hassles that you might have? And how do you let your customer know that that's why you're making those choices so that they feel better about it?
So I'll say a couple things and you guys can add whatever I miss. I never want to compete on price. I know we have to. I honestly, though, I was a spec builder. I didn't go out and do bids like you guys are doing. I didn't have that to deal with. Fortunately, the people that we ended up working with for 20, 25, 30 years and are still working with the company, they price competitive because every week they could be on one of our jobs. They didn't have to go out and hunt. There was a lot of costs they didn't have because we always gave them work. And we didn't pay them. We could find other cheap, less expensive producers. But somebody mentioned this before in here. I don't know who said it. We're driven by the schedule and we're driven by the cost, and quality gets hidden. And we often call quality the hidden constraint. No one should want a house that's built to spec. Have you looked at the building code lately? No one should want a house that's built just to code. So if you're going to compete on cost, that's what you're stuck with. We built, I lived in one of the houses our company built. I want to go back 30, 40 years from now and be proud that we built that house. So first off, I don't want to compete on cost. Now there's the other side of that where it's not stupid. You don't want to pay a ridiculous amount, but I wanted to pay for quality, someone that I could trust. But the other side of that is using that is we did stay sort of in contact with what market rates were. When one of our subs needed to go up on us because their costs change, our costs change, we'd go out and benchmark it. We'd go out and get 5 quotes and see if they were competitive with what we saw in the marketplace. We'd tell them we're getting 5 quotes, so you better be on the money. The exception, not the exception for us is, but there is a company, I will not mention the name, but they used to be located in Wilkesboro, now they're located in Mooresville. You can figure out who that is. They have used some of the same subcontractors and suppliers for 20, 30 years to build their stores, that they've never gone out and got a competitive quote on those. And I know someone in the last year or two that has gone to work at the company in that space, and they hadn't done competitive bids for 10 years on stuff. They were just getting charged what they got charged, and they were getting drastically overcharged. There's some really nice houses in Wilkesboro built with that money. So it's something that you've got to be careful about.
Okay. And I appreciate that. One of the things, I relate that to IT as well. And it doesn't matter what the product is that you do. When you are driven by cost and schedule only, people will say, well, I assume the quality is there. The problem is if you always go to the cheapest person or who can get it done in that period of time, you have to remember that it may not be realistic to start with. Tony said he was already behind the 8 ball before he ever started a project in some cases. Does it give you the value at the end, when you take delivery of that house, of that building, whatever that is, if it was on schedule, on budget, but they really couldn't meet that quality aspect. You're gonna be using whatever that is that you're building, especially in a house, you're living in it for a long time. What you don't want is nails popping, you don't want walls out of square, you don't want fixtures that aren't properly mounted. You would have, if you understood those three constraints a little better, you would have said, I wanted at least a minimum level of quality, and I'm gonna have to make some trade-offs in the other two, potentially. And I deal with it, actually, I'll point out, Kevin and I work together. And what we do is we work for a construction company as well. And we are driven by schedule and by budget. And there's always that assumption that that means quality is always exactly everything I want. Unfortunately, that's not the case. You get to pick two, you don't get to pick all three.
Yeah, the core job of a project manager is managing stakeholder expectations. Day one, we start educating our homeowner. What does a quality project look like? It's not a fancy cabinets and countertop and a nice looking bathroom. The quality, it can be that, but it's internal. It's the guts of the house. It's what you use in between the walls that no one sees. And we begin educating. This is why we use this material and that material. And we could use a lesser expensive material, but we don't want our reputation on that. So I think that starts with helping them understand the difference between grade and features in terms of quality is really important, because most people only think of terms of quality as aesthetics. They don't think about reliability, functional, grade. They don't think about all the different aspects of quality that exist. And that's something that we would very intentionally in that pre-construction phase work on. This is why we're doing what we're doing.
How about we shift gears on the communications? What does it take to be successful running a project in the space of communications? How often, what type of methods do you use? How do you make sure that you're getting the proper feedback?
I think a great deal of that as a manager is delegation for me. Setting the expectations on the team to give that feedback. Feedback's everything. And like you were talking about, your trade feedback. Where's the guys failing that's not supporting you as a trade, you know? I think for us, every morning and every afternoon we have a briefing, you know, before we dispatch. Just a little sit around, you know, how'd it go yesterday, you know, how'd it go this evening, and we talk and then we delegate to everybody what the expectation is. And communications, that's as important as a paycheck. For us, if we're having things that are failing and it's 2 or 3 days before you figure it out, you're already behind the 8 ball, even worse, you know. So gosh, that's such a big important factor. Project status is mainly what we communicate. We're construction. Did the floor go in today, you know? And if it didn't, what are you going to do with the schedule? And it's just, so for us, it's a given have to. It's almost forced. But for me, I like to delegate it out, let the superintendents come back and manage the project and have comfort ownership, you know?
Okay, you mentioned that you don't want the trades waiting on you. So that your folks that are out managing those schedules, when something changes, the requirement for them is to make sure that they alert those trades to make those adjustments in their schedule as well.
That's why we have the look ahead. You know, we have a weekly get-together meeting with the trades, talk about the schedule. First thing on the agenda is safety. And then, you know, we talk about any limited access zones or anything of that nature, and then we move on to where are we in the schedule. And one thing that I like to do is kind of different. If I've got a commercial project, I'll bring the MEPs in and say, you've got a window of 6 weeks. I don't care how you big boys figure it out. You know, y'all grown men, you got 6 weeks to do it. And let them communicate amongst themselves. Otherwise, you're sitting here and saying, well, Tony, you told me I was going to be there next week, and, you know, I'm ready, and, you know, but if you can have the trades partner and take an ownership block of that schedule, then that communication's off your back and delegated to the proper guys, and you say, hey, you know, figure it out, man. Yeah. So.
Lou, you mentioned that your 2 sons actually act as the project managers for you. Can you talk a little bit about the communications that you have and the role that you pass on to them and their responsibility out to the supervisors?
Well, in my case, it's probably a little different than most because I have one foot out the door, so the business is there, it's going to be there. So they have pretty much free reign. I mean, you know, and I'm not saying this because of my sons. They grew up in it, and I made them work when they were kids. When I was building houses, I mean, they just had to work. They didn't have a choice. And they learned a lot, and there's probably not a lot of things in the construction trade that they couldn't do themselves. And do them from time to time, because when we have someone that doesn't perform, they perform it if we have to. I mean, that's just the way it is, and they have a free reign, and they do a good job. But they hold their superintendents accountable for what they do, and we're really trying to come up with I mean, everybody is hourly or salary, whatever the case may be, but we're trying to come up with a bonus program that's fair, that if they get their job done, and it's in constraints, it's on schedule, you know, that they get a bonus for that, they get something for that. It sounds like a great idea, and it is, but it's difficult to put that in place to be fair and to evaluate, because every job is different. But I watch what they do, and they work long hours. You know, they go in jobs. Even when I was doing it, I like to go in job after the day was over, when nobody was around, and I could walk through. Nobody was bothering me, and I could see what was going on, see what was done, examine the quality of the work. Sometimes I've enjoyed cleaning up through the job because I could see what was going on. You may be amazed what you can see by doing it, and they do the same thing. They go out there, they work through their superintendents, but they go on site too to make sure, because the ultimate responsibility is theirs.
Joe, communications?
They've said most of it. One thing I will say is I hate status meetings. I just do. I like the idea of a stand-up, kind of a quick thing. It's almost like an agile concept, right? What are you working on yesterday? What are you working on today? And what's in your way kind of idea. I think that's great. But status meetings where people could just read about it and get the status. I like decision meetings, not status meetings. So I think one of the big things in communications is don't pull people together just to tell them things that they can read. Pull them together to make, when you actually need them to make a decision. And as many decisions as you can make dispersed, make them dispersed. I just think meetings are the killer of productivity. Do I?
I agree with him wholeheartedly on that, because you get heavy on meetings.
Yeah.
There's something we've done at a different company, but when you, like, said you wanted to check some type of a bonus, and we've done this where in that meeting or that group that you get together in the morning and talk about stuff, we'll go ahead, if we, like last week, we were on track, everybody's done everything, everybody's worked well together, everything's going well, we'll just pass the hat. And we'll have 20s, 5s, 10s in the hat, and everybody pulls something out that morning. And, you know, it's like, hey, it's just a little bonus, a little change, but it really promotes, one, coming to the meeting, two, really being team players, and it really kind of helps motivate them. And that's worked well under the company that we've worked with.
You made me think about one thing that I would do is I would carry around $25, $50 gift cards to restaurants.
Yeah.
In my pocket. I would always have 3 or 5 in the truck. When I was out on the job site, saw someone doing a good job, and $25, $50, who cares? But for some reason, when somebody else is buying your dinner for you, you know, there's just something about that.
And they do a little extra.
Yeah.
You know, hey, this morning I grabbed $20, or I got $10.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent.
It worked out well.
Yeah.
We just started one that we're basically for quality improvement control. We have so much going on. We split it, so our installers, our physical guys, we set a percentage of the total hours budget. But right now, there'll be no challenge over the base until we get a good read on what quality issues we're having, and we're gonna extend that down into the training. We'll give it the benefit down, they know it first. Our PMs, we've done it for inventory control. So they get a little bit of a percentage of the product that goes on with the job. The cost provided the inventory closes out correctly, there are overruns, and then the inventory years. Different way to go about the same thing.
All right, we're about out of time. I would just like it, if you would give these gentlemen a round of applause.